What's a real life glitch you've experienced that you still can't explain? In high school I did archery, and one day at shooting practice one of the new kids shot a bullseye exactly, dead center. This isn't that remarkable. You fire enough arrows, sooner or later one of them will be a bullseye, but everyone was being nice and congratulating him. Suddenly, a voice in my head, which sounded like me, but didn't feel like me, said, "Yeah, but Lynn's about to do the same thing." And I could see in my mind's eye, Lynn firing an arrow, it flying through the air and hitting a dead center bullseye. Then, maybe 3 or 4 seconds later, I watch as Lynn fires an arrow and it flies in exactly the trajectory I had seen in my head, and lands with a thwack. Bullseye. Everyone is over congratulating Lynn now. She was new too, and I'm standing off to the side wondering what the frick just happened. It happened one more time a month or 2 later too. I saw something happen in my head exactly as it did a few seconds later. I've forgotten the details of the second time though, and it's never happened since. When I was about 13-14, I went on a trip to another state with my church youth group. We drove through the country for hours in a region I had never been to before. Eventually we ended up in a small town. I was looking out the window and realized I knew this town as if I had lived there before. Like, I knew the post office would be a few blocks ahead on the right, and then, sure enough, there it was. Weirder. I knew what the buildings would look like. I predicted the location of all the landmarks in the town before we were close enough to see them, and all of the predictions were correct. It was very spooky and got the other kids on the bus a little riled up. I had left my cell phone, this was 2006 so it was an LG flip phone, on the charger when I went to work. After an 8-hour shift I got home and grabbed it. There was a voicemail from an unknown number. I listened to it and it was a man saying he had just received a call from my number and wanted to make sure it wasn't someone he knew that needed something. I checked the call log and sure enough at 2 p.m., about 3 hours before I was home, my phone called a number. I called him back and asked if someone said anything. At this point I was convinced someone broke in. He said he could hear someone talking in the background but it wasn't something he could understand. That's why he called back. I never figured out if it was a polite intruder using my phone without stealing anything or something more spiritual. I'm not a believer in ghosts but quite a few unexplainable things happened in that house. Years ago I was driving home late from work and as I was waiting at an intersection my whole car jerked violently to the right. It actually lifted off the ground and sent my drink flying. I looked up and saw the light was green so I restarted the car, manual transmission. It stalled and started to go through and pull over to check for damage. At that moment a drunk woman in an SUV ran the red light and smashed into a power transformer. If whatever happened to me hadn't I would have been T-boned on my driver door. I called 911 and stayed to give my statement, but I think the woman died as the ambulance did not have sirens on when it left. By far most of the time when we're transporting a patient we don't use lights and sirens, because their lives are not in danger. It's only when we have a working code or someone heading south really fast that we bother with them. There's a good chance she was fine. Went out of state to a casino with my family. The casino had 2 floors. It kind of looked like a mall. You could see the top floor just by looking up and you got to the top floor by using an escalator. The bathroom was on the top floor and my mom went to the bathroom alone. She was gone for about 15 minutes before I went looking for her. I checked the restroom and she wasn't in there. The rest of my family, 5 people, spread out to look for her and met back by the escalator and no one could find her. I was holding her phone for her so I couldn't call her. I saw a suspicious looking man standing by the ladies' room the entire time we were looking and I thought maybe he killed her and stuffed her in the trash or maybe he killed her in the men's room. I'm irrational when I am in panic mode, so I checked there too. Finally after another few minutes my mom comes down the escalator looking zoned out. I was so relieved to see her. She was tripping out because she said she took the escalator and it took her to another building across the street and then back to where we were even though she got on the right escalator. I swear there was only 2, one going up and another going down. The crazy part was that the buildings weren't even connected at all. Story. One day, I was driving with my son, 3, and daughter, infant. Son was in a car seat, all the way in the back of my van. Daughter was in the middle. I know my son had boots on, because there was no snow on the ground, so I tried to put his shoes on and he screamed bloody murder until he got boots. We went directly to the van. When we got to our destination, a grocery store less than 10 minutes away, he no longer had boots on. Now, keep in mind that the windows in the back of my van don't open at all. Neither do the windows in the middle, only the ones in the front. And since it was winter, I definitely didn't open those. After a quick search in the parking lot with no results, we obviously had to go back home cause he couldn't walk around the store in socks. When we got back home, I searched the car properly. After about 20 minutes, it wasn't even about managing to get to the grocery store. It was the principle of the thing. I was going to find those goddamn boots. I removed car seats and entire seats from the van. I searched every possible space I could access, let alone my strapped-in 3-year-old. I even searched everywhere in between the spot I put his boots on and the car. I never found those goddamn freaking boots. He ate them. Shoes would have tasted weird, obviously. I was in college and home for break or some holiday. My dad was out at the grocery store picking up several last-minute items while my mom is wrapping up her beauty routine. I'm ready to go, sitting at our kitchen table scrolling through my phone. To set the scene, my position at our kitchen table looks out the back door down the steps to our driveway with garages in the basement. I hear a rumbling below me in the garage and think I must have missed my dad pulling in. I finish up my phone browsing and hear grocery bags crinkling behind me down the basement stairs, so I get up and start heading down to help him unload, and as I turn the corner there is no movement, no sound, and no grocery bags sitting by the door waiting to be carried upstairs. So I go open the garage door and his side is empty. I just closed the door and headed back to my seat at the table. As I sit back down, my dad's truck whips in the driveway and starts backing towards the garage. I wait, hear the grocery bags, and head downstairs. Hey dad, need some help? When I was young, maybe 7, after my mom got a divorce from my dad, we lived in this creepy apartment. I think kids have a sense about creepy crap, and I think I knew from the start that something was off about this apartment. Little backstory, and probably part of why it always creeped me out, my mom got a really good deal on it because she agreed to fix it up a little. Nothing crazy, just basically cleaning out the stuff the old tenant had left and slapping some fresh paint on the walls. The previous tenant had vanished one day. The owner said that rent time came and went and the tenant never paid, so after calling numerous times they finally went into the apartment and the tenant was gone, but left all of their stuff. So the way this apartment was set up, when you entered the front door, a stairway was immediately to your left, a door to a bedroom immediately to your right, and then straight ahead was a hallway with an open living room and kitchen at the end. So if you're standing in the doorway, you can see into the bedroom, up the stairs, and into the living room. Once you enter the living room, you can see the full kitchen. One day, I was playing a computer game in the downstairs bedroom and started to get hungry. I walked out of the bedroom, calling for my mom as I walked down the hallway. No answer. When I rounded the corner into the kitchen, she wasn't there. I went back down the hallway and started up the stairs, but as I was about halfway up I felt a really creepy feeling and decided to go back down the stairs. All the while, still calling for her. At the bottom of the stairs, I opened the front door and called for her with no response. Went back down the hall to open the sliding glass back door. This was an apartment complex, so we had no backyard, just a little deck, and nothing. Panicking, I went back down the hall towards the original bedroom I was in, trying to figure out what to do. I decided to grab the phone to call someone, walked back down the hall to get it, and there stands my mother, cooking dinner in the kitchen. When I asked her where she'd been, she said she'd been there the whole time. I asked why she didn't answer when I was calling for her or if she saw me opening the back door, and she said no. It's been probably about 15 or so years and I still think about this incident periodically. That apartment was creepy as frick. Like the day we moved out, we found this hidden room type thing disguised by a vent cover that we'd never seen in the 2 years we lived there. I had recurring nightmares of the same man, and there were a few times our front door either wouldn't lock or we'd get up in the morning to it standing open. So glad we didn't live there for longer than we had to. Oh heck no. Dude probably was lingering about and watching you sleep. I had an abusive childhood. One time, in middle school, I had a friend over. A very rare occurrence for me. My friend and I were about to enter the house and go up to my room. Now the door we were going through connected to the laundry room, which has the washer dryer like right in front of the door. So if you are doing laundry, sometimes the door will hit you. I had a premonition. Nothing else to call it. I put my hand on the door handle and in a premonition of the exact words and way my stepmother would scream at me the moment I opened the door. I turned to my friend and said, when I open this door, my mom will be there, and she will be very upset. He looked super confused, but sure enough, I opened the door and she yelled and screamed at me exactly the way I saw, and then we both ran up to my room. I don't believe in the supernatural, religion, the occult, ghosts, or anything like that at all. But anytime I start to get 100% atheistic neck but in my own head, I remember that and it makes me think. It's not bulletproof because she had yelled at me for that several times, but I'll never forget the absolute certainty I had at that moment of what exactly was about to happen. I've never been more certain of anything in my life since. Weirded my friend out too. Hope you're doing well right now. I was around 7 years old running through the backyard at a friend's house. Around my neck was a cloth cord and hanging from it was a bronze stamped medallion that I had gotten at a recent Renaissance fair. As I was running, I tripped like the klutz I was and fell forward, the necklace and medallion flying off my neck and landing a few feet in front of me. I started to get up and looked at the necklace but then froze. It was sinking into the ground. The metal part was swallowed first and the rest of the cord with it. I was so shocked I couldn't move. I was able to snap out of it and lunge forward, grasping at the last piece of the cloth before it was pulled under. I sat staring and poking at the ground for a good 10 minutes after that. It was completely solid. I never saw it again and have no idea what happened. Probably just yard goblins. Will never understand this for as long as I live. In high school I liked to wake up early in the mornings so I'd have time to eat breakfast, watch TV, maybe do some last minute homework and relax before I'd begin my day. I always set my alarm at 6 AM. So that morning as usual my phone alarm went off. I grabbed my phone to turn it off. I distinctly remember reading a text message from a friend, who was an early riser like me, asking me did I want to grab fried rice later that night with the rest of our friends. He sent this at 5:39 AM. It was still September, so the sun was always up at this hour. I got out of bed and immediately hopped in the shower. When I got out I headed down to the kitchen to brew coffee and make some breakfast. While I was waiting on the coffee pot to heat up I ran back to my room to grab my phone. When I looked down at my phone I just about croaked. The time on the phone read 3:30 AM. To make matters worse I looked outside and the sun wasn't even up yet. What's even weirder was I never had even received that text from my friend. I just sat there bewildered and frustrated, running through the chain of events from that morning over and over again. I eventually made my way back to the kitchen. Seeing that I was wide awake now I didn't need coffee anymore. I stayed up the rest of the morning not even trying to attempt sleep again. Later that morning something even stranger happened. At 5:39 AM I received that text message from my friend. I've spent a lot of time over the years trying to decipher the events from that morning. All I know is that somehow I woke up in the future and my shower took me back to the present. Can anyone relate to this? Once in college, some friends and I drove out of the city and down a country road in a secluded area so we could smoke pot and cruise around. Didn't really have a secure place to smoke near campus and we were dumb enough to think it was safer in a moving vehicle. So after nightfall, we are on our way headed back to town. And it seems out of nowhere we are in this massive traffic jam on this country road. There are tons of cars in front of us and even cars trying to pass on the shoulder. Cars were racing past going the other way, which really didn't lead anywhere. There just seemed to be a kind of pandemonium, like we were driving around a sports stadium after a game. There were no lights from a police car or fire truck, no evidence of a crash, nothing. We were literally screaming because it was so weird. It all came out of nowhere. It was a 2-lane road that didn't lead to anywhere, yet there were tons of cars jammed up. Then it just seemed like all the cars were gone. The traffic let up and we were cruising along again, but I don't remember seeing cars in front of us or behind anymore. It was like we were alone on the road. We lost it and couldn't stop talking about it for like a week. I'd like to say it was a glitch, but it's probably because we were smoking some good stuff. two come to mind. The first is on occasion I'll have dreams of events that later happen exactly as they did in the dream. Normally it's nothing major, just a conversation that goes exactly how it did in the dream or something similar. The other was much worse, which is I ate a pot brownie that contained bath salts. I was unaware of this fact. While I wouldn't call it a glitch, reality did break for me for about 12 hours and I was convinced I was in heck for a while. I get that dream thing too. Worst is that as I've gotten older it's becoming recursive. I'll be in the middle of a conversation and I know how this conversation ends. Wait, I've thought that before about this conversation. I'm about 3 or 4 loops deep on a handful of different deja vus. I was in my early teens, reading something in my room. I was propped on my bed by pillows, the bed being on the opposite corner of the door and myself facing my window. For reference's sake, we'll say the door was on the western wall's northwest corner, the bed along the southern wall and touching the southeast corner, and my window, which I was looking at the eastern wall. So I was reading, with the door open, when suddenly my dad walks in, holding some papers and about to tell me something. I see him from the corner of my eye, look up, and he's not there. I distinctly recall what he wore, that he was holding papers. Heck, I even heard the papers rustle, but he was just not there. Turns out that neither of my parents were even home at that time. They were out shopping and I hadn't even noticed. I have to. One time both me and my sister were sitting in my living room and then all of a sudden she just freezes and asks me if she sees that black thing on the street. I said no and then I blinked and it was an experience I never want to feel again. The TV went silent. Everything around me went silent and all I could hear was my sister yelling that he's coming closer. I look back on the street and sure enough there was a shadowy person walking towards us. Then everything stopped and went back to normal. One time I was at work, just counting money. We were required to listen to the local AM radio station which plays country music mostly in Twins games when they're on. I was counting money and all of a sudden Don't Worry Be Happy starts playing. I like this song so I start jamming to it while counting money. Then it plays again. I start getting a little skeptical but I roll with it. Then it plays again. And again. I contact one of my friends who works at the radio station and was like WTF. He was working at the time. He controls what gets played. And he said that's not even on their playlist. When I was younger I had a fantastic relationship with my paternal grandfather. From as early as I can remember to being 12-13 I would go to my grandparents' house every Friday or after nursery school or whatever and he would always drive me home, about 10 minutes, to my parents. I loved the drives home. We'd often take longer routes, long cuts, to spend more time in the car. For the longest time he always had this one CD in the car. If I recall correctly it was a Now That's What I Call Music or maybe a similar brand. One song that stood out was Cyndi Lauper Girls Just Wanna Have Fun. We loved that song so much, always had it playing once or twice on the drive home, and despite me being a preteen boy and he a old Yorkshireman, it became our favorite song. Fast forwards a few years, I'm 13 or 14 and on holiday abroad with my parents. We spend pretty much the entire time sat by the pool at the hotel which played the same music. This hotel had one playlist of songs, maybe 20-25 tracks long. We could always predict what the next song would be. It became a bit of a joke between the family that the music was so terrible. Whilst we're away, Granddad was taken into hospital. He'd not been a well man for as long as I can remember, and this would be the last time he went to hospital. When things got bad, my dad got the phone call to come home and see him before he passes, and he does just that. I stayed at the hotel for the rest of the holiday with my sister and mother, who shielded us well from what was going on, but we still knew. There was a specific phone call that my dad made to my mum via the hotel reception that I identified as being the one straight after my grandfather passed. I was sitting on a bench with my sister as my mother spoke. Then, the next song that played was of course, Girls Just Wanna Have Fun, not being part of the repeating playlist or ever being heard play in the last 7 days. There it was. After it ended the music went back to the crappy playlist. Never really shared this story before. It's what's led me to fully believe the universe is interactive and fluid and nothing is really real. The more I think about it the stranger it gets. That song also has a habit of creeping up at strange times too. I was in high school and I had had a vivid dream I was in a white ball gown type dress being led to my execution. I was to be drowned. I will never forget the dream because the emotions I felt were so conflicted. The guy leading me to my death stopped and put a hand on my arm and said in the most sincere voice, "It's not your fault. What happened wasn't your fault. What you are doing is brave, but this wasn't your fault." I was put to death and woke up gasping for breath. I panicked because every glass in my room was full of water and I was completely drenched from head to toe. I changed clothes and sheets and chalked it up to sleepwalking, sleep drinking, and tried to go back to sleep. Why I will never forget it. The next day at school I was sitting at lunch and my now husband friend sat next to me and suddenly grabbed my arm and said, "Whatever happened, it wasn't your fault." I just looked at him confused and asked what he was talking about. He had no idea. Just said that it seemed like the right thing to say. To this day I am still weirded out by it. My husband doesn't remember it. I have 2 chargers for my phone. One day, I grab my charger in the morning, use it when I'm out, and when I'm home again it's not anywhere in my bag. I figure I lost it, but no big deal, I've got another. So for a week I use the new one. In this time period I clean my house and room several times. Nothing interesting happens. About a week later, I go shopping and buy a new jacket. I come home, plug my phone in, with the second charger I've been using for a week, put the new jacket on my bed and busy myself with a task. A few minutes later I turn around, and there's a phone charger lying on top of my brand new jacket that I bought that day. I turn to look at my phone, and it is plugged in. I completely freaked out internally. That charger that I lost over a week before just appeared a week later. And not only that, but it appeared perfectly placed on a new item of clothing that was not even a few hours old. No idea how it got there, but now I have 2 chargers again, so that's cool. I had a weird one recently, where it felt as if I had slightly time traveled. I was watching an interview on YouTube of a politician. It was on an issue I had very little knowledge on by a person I had no prior knowledge of. Then during the interview it kind of started again, where the video I was watching went back in time by about 2 minutes. I was watching this, I felt wow, I feel I've heard all this before. Then I assumed it was an intense deja vu, but then I paused the video and word for word repeated everything he was about to say next. I checked the timeline of the video, and I had not rewound it or seen it again. I rewound the same video to see if the footage had just been looped or something, but it hadn't. It was as if I quickly peered into the future to see the video, then watched it again. It was really strange. You probably just rewinded it without you noticing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.